Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am really delighted to introduce my guest today, Miki Feldman Simon. Miki is an executive coach, global business leader, speaker, and author of Core Leadership. She helps high-performing leaders expand their impact and lead with authenticity. Over her 3-decade career, she has held leadership roles in marketing, operations, and human resources across multiple industries and guided organizations through growth and successful acquisitions. In her coaching, Miki empowers leaders to align their values, actions, and impact. Known for her warmth, intelligence, and candor, she blends behavioral science with practical tools that drive real, lasting change. Please join me in welcoming Miki Feldman Simon. Welcome, Miki.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm very excited to be here and be a guest on your wonderful podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to have you here. As you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to start with the early years. So take us back there and tell us a little bit about how your formative years may or may not have informed where you are today.
I was born in Israel, and when I was 12 years old, my family moved to Australia. That was quite a big change. I was 13 when, you could say, I started my career, as that was when I got my first job.
Oh.
I was working in the markets in Australia. The markets were the place that was open on the weekends where people would go and shop. And that is when I first met my husband. I thought he was drop dead gorgeous, but he was 18 and I was 13. So I was a little girl, and I'm thankful we met again 10 years later.
Wow. That could be a whole nother podcast episode.
Yes. We have an interesting story. The rest of high school, I was what Australians used to call a checkout chick, which meant I worked at the checkout at the supermarket. When I finished high school, I actually started studying fashion design. I used to make my own clothes during high school. Very quickly realized that it's a hobby and not going to be my career. I was lucky that my mother was a nurse and one of her patients had a design house, and she introduced me to them, and I got a job in their design house, and I hated it.
What a great opportunity.
Oh, it was. And it was a real learning lesson of some things need to stay as hobbies and not necessarily your career. So that only lasted about 6 months. And I moved back to live in Israel on my own. And a little while after being there, I decided I wanted to stay. And Israelis, when they're 18 years old, they all go into the army. And I really felt like an outsider that I didn't serve. So I actually volunteered. I was nearly 20 at the time. I served as a leader for 2 years as an instructor. While growing up, I was part of a youth movement. And as I got older there, I became a leader. So this thing, volunteering on the side, helped me get that job in the army, where for 1 year I was teaching teenagers about the army and teaching them how to shoot guns. Quite stressful.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And the second year, I was placed in an undeveloped town where their recruitment rate was very low. Most of these teenagers ended up in jail. Often, if they didn't go into the army, they dropped out of school. The army gave them an opportunity to learn a job, learn an occupation. When that did not happen, they'd end up going to jail. It's interesting because when I think about it, even then, I was helping people find a position in the army that they liked in the first year. And the second year, I was really trying to help people step into their potential, help them thrive. After that, I returned to Australia for a little while, and that's where I met my husband again. I signed up to study in Israel, and he came to live in Israel with me. I started studying economics and management.
Huh.
I hated it. My husband was not too happy because he left Australia to come to Israel with me because I was starting to study. He actually left the PhD. And this was in 1990. The Iraq War started in Israel and actually shut down the university. I realized that the last thing that I wanted to do is study calculus. It was just the wrong thing for me. And that was a great way to not go back to the next semester. I started then studying psychology and educational counseling. That was definitely a great fit. I was very interested in the work. And what happened next is that in the last year of the studies in Israel, you do a practicum. So you work with mentally ill people. That made it very clear to me that I'm not going to be a therapist.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't take responsibility for people's lives. It was just too heavy for me and depressing. And I started working again. I worked for a few years in a company that was teaching kids how to think visually.
Ooh,
And
cool.
it was very cool, very interesting program with a famous artist that probably people here don't know him. But I was running all the programs throughout Israel. And I was training leaders and teachers in how to use the program. While I was also doing my master's degree in organizational behavior, and I had a child. Then I finished my studies and I was working in HR, recruiting for a couple of companies. And I also started my own company, bringing employee assistance programs to Israel. So that did not exist there. And I collaborated with an Australian company to bring the idea to Israel. We were doing really well, and we actually reached a point where we were going to merge with one of Israel's biggest HR consulting firm. But my husband started his own software company at the time, and he was never home. He would be away for 3 weeks at a time, and on a good night, he'd be home at 11. Most nights it was 3 a.m. because he was working with West Coast in the US, and we had no family life. So we had one child already, and I was basically functioning as a single mother. That was not my plan in life.
Yeah.
And we came to the US for 1 year. And so I dropped everything that I was doing, decided to prioritize family at that point, and our life changed dramatically. My husband was home at 8 most nights. He was home on the weekends. He would still travel overseas, but it wasn't quite these 3 weeks at a time. And while we were here, a few months later, we decided that we're going to stay. And we've been here for 28 years. But one other thing that happened then is that when we arrived, I did not realize this, but I did not have a visa to work here. That was really hard for me. I was 30 years old. I felt like I was at the height of my career, and my independence, my work was really important to me, and I had to stop. We had our second child. I took a whole lot of different courses, jewelry making, pottery, and kept myself busy.
Yeah.
But the moment that I could go back to work, I did.
Yeah.
I found a job in HR. And I want to mention here that as I knew my green card was coming, I started networking and telling people about my experience, that I'm looking for work. And a friend connected me with a company that had a branch in Israel. And this is where I thought that it was a disadvantage that my HR experience was from Israel. But this is where it became an advantage because they were trying to bridge the two cultures together. And being also an Israeli was really helpful there. step back into my career. I was the head of HR. I did not work full-time as head of HR. I still wanted to be home in the afternoons, and I managed to find that flexibility, which was amazing. I worked for that company, Phonetic Systems, for about 5 years, too long, because I realized when I was there, the company was in telephony. They would talk about switches, and honestly, I would be sitting as part of the management team, of course, the only woman in the room. But I would switch off when they were talking about all the technical stuff. And then it became really clear to me that I wanted to be in a field where I could contribute more, not just in my expertise in HR, but when there was general discussion of things, I wanted to be more interested. I want to have more impact. And the next job that I got was actually as VP operations.
Wow.
Again, through friends who knew me in the past. And I was in charge. It was an educational software company. It was called Ginger Software. And I was in charge of the operations in the US and the education worldwide. Go back to my degree and education, psychology. And it was helping people who had language-based disabilities and people who were learning English. I learned English as an immigrant as well. So I really felt that I could contribute at a very different level. And I want to mention something here. At that point, my kids were a little bit older, and my husband could also spend more time at home, and some things flipped. So I took on more travel, and he was ready to take on more things at home. That was an agreement between us that at that point, I can invest more in my career. It's funny because at that point, I also had to learn to let go. As somebody who managed everything at home, suddenly somebody else was doing things. Can I tell you a funny story about that?
Yeah, of course.
So the first time I went away, I cooked before, left everything, arranged everything, and I come home and the dogs have no food. I'm like, okay. And I ask my daughter, I look at my daughter and I say, when was the last time you had a shower? And everybody looks at me like, what am I talking about? But the next time I came back, the dogs had food. My husband also said to me, honey, when I go away, I don't cook, we'll be fine. But when I asked my daughter, when is the last time you had a shower? She said, yesterday. And I learned not to ask when was the time before that.
It's so funny.
And just to close the loop of the next few things, so from there, I actually went to head a marketing department. Again, a different role at Swan Education. It was the same field as Ginger Software, so I had expertise in the field. I really looked at my strengths. Okay, so I was very good at understanding the customer perspective, looking at things from the other side, trying new things. I also realized that digital marketing was not, I really didn't know much about it. So I hired a really strong digital marketer. I looked at my strengths, I looked at what was missing and put that into it. Then in 2015, we actually went back to live in Australia for a year. My mother was dying. My father-in-law was dying, a very hard year. So I left my work. And when I came back in 2016, it was another junction of having to decide what to do next. It's a privilege that I had the opportunity to also to be able to put thought into it and decide what it is that I want to do.
True. Yeah.
And again, I looked at my strengths and what interested me. My mother had just passed away. I wanted to help women. And I realized that I had multiple career breaks in my life. I did really well, always succeeding to get back in the workforce. I saw other women here in my town. I live in Lexington, Massachusetts. It's a wealthy town where a lot of women stepped out of the workforce and were really struggling to get back in.
Right.
I started a company called I'm Back at Work. I was doing a lot of webinars, something that I did at Crossroads Education before, and they started coaching women in how to get back into the workforce. at the same time, I joined a company called Profitect as a fractional head of HR. It actually worked really well, also being more current. I hadn't done HR for a while at that point, and what was going on in the interviewing and everything else. I also realized that I really enjoyed executive coaching. I was coaching the executives in the company and really shifted to do more of that. The company was acquired, it was a great success. It was a great opportunity for me to go on my own and focus on executive coaching. And I want to go back to my degree for a moment. If you remember, I said that I realized that psychology, being a therapist, wasn't for me. I really feel that coaching was the answer.
Yes.
Because it is very forward-looking, and I feel that I found what I was meant to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally relate to what you're talking about. Having also worked in the mental health field early in my career, and then finding coaching and seeing there's some overlaps between certain types of therapies and coaching, but yet I think the way in which you work with people, it's intended to work with people from a healthier place. You're not trying to solve anybody's deeper problems, even though things will come up sometimes in a coaching session, but that's not really the intent.
I agree. I think it's not the intent. And so yes, we go deeper sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think often when you come out of those conversations, there's a more positive, I'm trying to think of a different word, not just positive.
Oh, it's proactive. I think you're looking at where you are here and now today and where you want to be, where you want to go.
Definitely. Agreed.
Yeah. I was curious about when you were in educational software, you were VP of Ops or operations, as they say, Ops. And then I love the way you navigated these different roles, HR, operations, marketing. I get this feeling of fearlessness, of diving into different areas, disciplines. And yet I think you had some exposure to these things. People who work in HR have to have an understanding of different functions across an organization. They may not have the depth that somebody who has actually studied these things, but yet, and I think with operations, you even have an even closer view of a lot of these things. But I do think it was brave to go from the operations role into heading up marketing. But I can also imagine that you went and worked within organizations where they welcomed you coming in with the experience and the perspectives that you brought.
They headhunted me. It was a company that I met their CEO through the work that I was doing. They were, in some ways, a competitor, but only in very specific aspects. And they recruited me to come in. And I think that, they obviously saw the capability. I think there is a curiosity in me and this belief of why not? Why not give it a go? Also with it, I think I'm a very practical person. So really thinking through, okay, what will this mean? What will I be doing? And knowing when to ask for help.
Interesting. And you said several times that you took a pause and looked at your strengths and at what you wanted. It wasn't just, I'm good at this, because a lot of people will go towards what they're good at. And then they find out, I'm good at this. I don't necessarily like it all that much. You've given yourself a chance to be curious about a number of things, given it a try, and let yourself discover you don't like certain things. I got a kick out of that. The fashion design, and then, you studied economics and management. Then you said, and I hated it. It's interesting to hear how you took a dive into all these different things and really gave them a good try. You've navigated each step of the way with a sense of, let's see what's possible here.
I think it's that. And it's also, you could look at my experiment with the fashion design and also with the economics and say, oh my God, failures. And instead, I took it as life lessons. And okay, so some things I will not like. And can I give listeners a tip about strengths as well?
Yes, absolutely.
So I find that sometimes we think of the strength and we think of it just as a skill. When I was head of HR at Profitect, we would interview candidates, and especially at specific levels, we would have a management meeting afterwards where people would say what they thought about a specific candidate. And over again, the things that I heard, people would look at me and say, Miki, how did you get that out of them? How did you hear that? And it was like, I didn't think much of it and of the fact that people were really opening up to me in conversations. So you could say I'm a good interviewer, but there's an important thing here to look. What does a good interview mean? What are the skills that I was using? Okay. So I was a good listener. I asked probing questions. I created psychological safety for the interviewee so they shared things with me. All those things are great coaching skills. So when we break down, I'm good at something, what skills am I using in there? It really helps you a lot more in thinking and opening it up to a lot more options.
I love that. That's great. I think those are some very important distinctions to unpack it further and not just look at it on the face, right?
Exactly. Then you're just looking at interviewing jobs instead of what else can I do with that skill.
Yeah, I like that. That's really helpful. And Profitect, that was the last full-time role that you had. Is that right?
And it wasn't always full-time. They wanted me to join as full-time, but I wanted to pursue my coaching as well.
Right.
And to start that as my own business. It was not full-time. I had been very good at creating the kind of role, whether it was earlier on, also not working full-time, still as the head of HR, and finding that balance between work and or that specific role and other things in my life.
And so once you finished up at Profitect, you've been full-time on your own after that.
Yes.
And let's talk about your book. Core Leadership, a 4-step framework to lead yourself, grow your influence, and amplify your impact. I love the title. I love the cover. I love all the things that are inside the book too. But I've gushed to you over and over again about the book. And I do want to say to the listeners that this is a book that really does speak to people who are really wanting to develop themselves as leaders. But I think it also is just a great book for how you develop yourself, period. And there's so many ways in which you can engage with this book. That's what I love about it. It's very accessible. And I can't encourage people enough to get their hands on it. Core Leadership, 4-step framework to lead yourself, grow your influence, and amplify your impact. What made you decide to write the book?
It was an interesting process because it wasn't on my bucket list to write a book. I didn't see myself as an author, but really once the framework came together, I felt like I had to get this message out there. It's like it took a force of its own, and I was trying to work out what it is that I do with my clients and the process that I've gone through myself. And once it all came together, it had to be a book. I'd been writing a blog beforehand, so I had all different stories and I had confidence in my writing. People would reach out and say how much they enjoyed reading them, how it helped them. And then when it all came together, I just felt like I can make a lot more impact with a book. Not everybody can afford an executive coach. So really helping anybody, honestly, anybody can afford a book or borrow it from the library,
Sure.
anybody who wants to grow themselves.
Sure. And CORE is an acronym for the framework. So, would you like to walk us through that? Because I think people would find that very helpful.
So it's an acronym, and the idea of it is also really leading from your core. And if you look at the cover as well, it's like these consecutive circles, because it gives you the strength to really lead from the inside, right?
Yes.
You have work from the inside out, and this is really lead from the inside.
Yes. We are so aligned.
Yes. So core, the C stands for clarify. And you clarify your values, your priorities, your strengths, what success means to you. And at the end of it, you really have a vision, a mission statement of who you want to be. We talk a lot about what we're going to do. We don't talk enough about the who.
Yeah.
And when we define really what matters most to us, we create purpose as well. And a lot of people are in that search for purpose.
Yeah.
And getting that clarity helps you get there.
Yes.
The O is operationalize. And we're all very good at talking. And the idea here is to move into action. So we're moving the intentions into actions by looking into our habits, the habits that are working for us, the ones that are not. And here, by building small, consistent habits, we are really shaping lasting change, and we're building alignment between who it is that we want to be and what we're actually doing.
I love that. I can't say enough great things about that, because I think as you said, people tend to talk about what they're doing, or they're putting a resume together and they have a long list of all the things that they did or are doing. And the distinction between that and starting to show up as who they are can make a big difference between getting a job and not getting a job.
And I'll also put it on another level that let's say you want to get a job. Okay, what are the habits that you need to adopt? And those habits can be spending time on LinkedIn, can be networking. But what is it that you're going to do? So getting specific on the actions. Again, you're not just saying, I'm going to look for a job and I'll network. Okay, when are you going to network? What will that look like?
The habits and the behaviors. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the R is for reflect. This is where we look internally. We look at how we get in our own way, because we all get in our own way. Here you pause and you really choose how to respond with intention. You look at your limiting beliefs, at your thoughts, ones that are positive, the ones that are negative. You look at your triggers to really understand what is it that I'm doing that's not helping me. And of course, working on changing those. And you're also really strengthening your present. And the idea is that you ask yourself at each point, who do I want to be right now? Okay. And we clarified who it is that we want to be. Okay.
Right.
So we know who we want to be. It's very hard actually in the moment to answer who do I want to be right now if we haven't done the initial work. Because in the moment when you're actually stressed or frustrated or whatever else, when you know, you can take that deep breath and really respond in the way that aligns with how you want to show up. Now, evaluate. This is where you want to check in on your progress, but you also want to understand your impact so you can course correct. And an important part here is we judge ourselves on our intentions. Other people judge us on our behaviors, on our actions. And this is where we want to try and understand, how is my behavior landing for other people?
Right.
So I intended, or I want to show up like this, or I think that I'm direct. Other people may say you're aggressive. Somebody may think that they're funny, but other people may think that they're just inappropriate. Really understanding that match or gap, it can also help you deepen trust with people and build better relationships.
So we have CORE, clarify, operationalize, reflect, and evaluate it. It covers a lot of ground. And this is why I call your book so accessible, because I think that there's a lot that people can do with this in terms of really moving themselves forward, or even having a conversation with somebody else about these things. You thinking about evaluate and understanding what your impact is, looking, not just thinking about what you intended, but what is your behavior and how does that have an impact on others. And a lot of leaders don't realize how much of an impact they have. These things are really critical. Your book, it's so full of exercises, stories, examples, and ways that people can understand these things in motion, but then also take a deeper look at themselves and figure out where might they need to pay closer attention. It's the kind of book that could help a new graduate or someone who's in the middle of their career. It's a wonderful resource.
It's important for me to mention that leadership starts with leading yourself.
Yes.
Leaders that put in this work become the kind of leaders that others want to follow. We have to start from within. Now, when I wrote the book, it was important to me that it won't just be theory, that it would be a practical guide.
Yes.
For people to use. So if I talk to you about clarifying your values, I will explain why, I will give you some stories, but there's exercises in there on how to do that.
Right.
So for each topic that I raise, there is also what you can do. So you're not left hanging in the air, not knowing what is next. And that was something that was really important to me in writing, as you call the book, very accessible book to anybody. And by the way, even with experienced executives that I work with, I have had these conversations where they would say to me, but Miki, this is who I am. And after a few times that you say, but is this who you want to be? Things can shift.
Right.
And it's what I've also found is that different things click for different people at different times. Like somebody might have said to me, I never really thought about my values in that way. And somebody else didn't think about the operationalizing.
Right.
And then somebody else will say, oh, my limiting beliefs. So it's okay to connect with different things. And I've had people mention to me, I connected with that and I went back. And this suddenly, because they're at a different point and we change.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the beauty of the book is it's evergreen, the kind of resource you keep and hold on to as you move through various experiences or different stages. The exercises and the ways in which you frame things, it's very practical. It gives you ways to be thinking things through. You don't have to come up with all of it yourself. You offer people a way to step into the process.
Thank you.
Which I love. I love that.
I will add one more thing.
Sure.
That I've found with people who are at a career junction, not quite sure what's next.
Yeah.
That the process of clarifying,
Yes.
of clarifying their values, their priorities, and their priorities now. So first of all, our values change. Sometimes it's things that happen around us, to us, the environment that we're in, assessing them now and what is it that's important to you? Because it's like maybe what my parents, my partner, to you. And what are your priorities today?
Right.
And when those things are clear, as well as your strengths, so you really know like what you're bringing to the table, what you're bringing to the interview, what is it that's important to you, it gives you confidence. So you show up in a different way. People lose confidence often when they're in between jobs and not quite sure what's next. That clarity is empowering.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And people need that. I hear that all the time. They're really trying to get their hands around who they are, even though they live with themselves every day. It's almost like they're too close to it. They need something else to give them a framework for working through it to articulate some things.
I think it's that, and I often think people don't think enough about it. It's
Yeah.
like, that's who I am, and rolling through life and what comes their way, rather than being more intentional. And the whole
Yes.
idea here
Yeah.
is to lead with intention.
Yes.
So it's how you show up or what you're going to be doing next.
Right.
And when you have that intention, you also have less regrets.
Yes.
It's so much easier to say no to certain things because you have that confidence and that knowledge of what is it that matters to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Miki, I know what matters to you. I can tell. So, if people want to get in touch or learn more about your work, what would be the best place for them to go? I know that you are on social media and are located in a number of spots. All of those links will be provided in the show notes. But what would be the best place for them to start to look for you?
My website,
Okay.
Miki is Miki, Feldman Simon. So MikiFeldmanSimon.com. I'm in LinkedIn and I post on LinkedIn. I'm active there. I think that those two places are the best places to reach out to me and
Great.
to sign up for the newsletter, follow my work.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because you're always writing and putting out new ideas and things. I know because I get all that stuff. So wonderful. So we're going to wrap up in a moment, but I have one more question for you, although I feel like you've probably answered it in a few different ways, but we'll still go there. We do have a lot of people listening who are thinking about what's next for them. What would be a key piece of advice you might give someone who is in the process of thinking about what's next?
Take the time, do this pause and a little bit, it may be a reset, it may not, to clarify, like to really understand your values, your priorities, your strengths, and what does success mean to you? So what could that look like? And do the exercise on the strength that we just mentioned now to really open up your opportunities so you can come with an open mind. And the other side of that pause, this is like the zoom out big pause, but in the moment, in the reflect, think in the moment, who do you want to be right now? So it's like we have the, who do I want to be as an umbrella? Who do I want to be right now? To really show up, whether it's at an interview, whether it's job searching at any point, to show up as your best.
Great. I can't encourage people enough to seek out your book, Core Leadership, a 4-step framework to lead yourself, grow your influence, and amplify your impact. Miki Feldman Simon, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Tammy. It's been such a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Miki Feldman Simon. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 295. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Did you know that ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts can help this podcast reach more people? Please help me to inspire more people to move their careers in meaningful directions by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button. Leave an honest rating and brief review. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. You can also help sustain the podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.